Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C, and we're talking Charlton and Big C sports every Monday through Friday at 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We are worldwide. I want to thank all of our listeners in Latin America, so bienvenidos, and thank you for all the tweets from London, England, also Berlin, Germany, as well as Canada, and of course the great United States. And also today, this segment is sponsored by Bud Light. We know you love Bud Light, Big C, because it helps you lose weight and it tastes great from what I understand.
Well, you get Bud Light from turning on the light switch, Charlton. That's the only time I want some light on my Bud, all right?
I understand that too. So, and as you know, there's so much talk about the college football draft and how we're all getting hyped about that. To me, it's kind of overhyped because some of the great players, they already are in the Hall of Fame, and they're playing every Sunday right now, Big C. But before we get into that, one of the other great players, John Matuszak, not only was he a great athlete, Big C, but he actually played a part in some movies. You know, we like to blend Hollywood with sports, Big C. Your thoughts on John Matuszak?
You know, John Matuszak, the late John Matuszak, got to let people know that, you know, was the last player drafted out of the University of Tampa. And ironically, Charlton, he was the #1 draft pick overall in 1972 in the NFL by the Houston Oilers.
Yeah.
And John had a decent career with the Oilers. He was eventually traded to the Oakland Raiders. As we know, the late Al Davis used to like to pick up reclamation projects, and he was a part of that 1977 Super Bowl winning team down in Pasadena when the Raiders beat the Minnesota Vikings, Charlton.
Yeah.
But, you know, Matuszak went on to play in several movies. Actually, his first movie role was while he was still a player, when he played in the movie North Dallas 40, which so many people in sports are well versed in.
Right.
But he also played in a movie called Caveman. And anybody in the music industry realizes that Ringo Starr, who was one of the former Beatles, played in that movie also with John Matuszak. So not only did he cross over into the acting world, but he played in a movie role with one of the all-time great entertainers in Ringo Starr from the Beatles. He played in a kids movie called Goonies back in the late 80s. But John Matuszak played a cross variance of roles.
Yeah.
As well as he did as a player on the field, playing defensive end and defensive tackle in the NFL.
Yeah.
But John Matuszak, you know, was well known for a great line when the Raiders were down in New Orleans in 1980 playing in the Super Bowl against the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah.
He came out with a line that he was quoted in Sports Illustrated. It's like, if you're going to hang in New Orleans, you got to cruise with the twos, because he never made curfew during that Super Bowl in 1980, and they just demolished the Philadelphia Eagles that year, Charlton.
Yeah, he didn't know what a curfew was, cruising with the twos. And I think a lot of the Oakland Raiders, they had that mantra about them, that they were tough guys, that they were renegades. And that song, The Autumn Wind Was a Raider. And that's something that they liked, that mystique. Al Davis built that mystique. And their uniforms were kind of championed after the military. They wanted to be the tough guy image. But as you mentioned, he was also a great actor too, Big C. And as we get into the draft, I just want to also say that this segment is sponsored by Beneath His Wings Foundation. To support or donate, go to bhwf.org. Also, for promotions, contact Cynthia Evans at CYNN Entertainment. She's the best in the business at entertainment and promoting in Northern California. So, Big C, you know how everybody's hyped on who's going to be the top quarterback. Is it going to be Carson Wentz out of a small school in the Midwest? Is it going to be Goff that never won a Pac-12 championship? Who's it going to be? I like Carlo Jones because he has won a national championship. I also like Hogan out of Stanford. So those are my two guys. But when you talk about great quarterbacks, how do you compare great quarterbacks to the hype we're getting right now, Big C? We're not looking at the next Joe Montana, Big C.
Charlton, I don't think this hype has ever existed in a draft looking at quarterbacks coming out. If you go back to 1983, when you had Jim Kelly, Dan Marino, Tony Eason, the kid out of UC Davis, name evades me at the moment, with O'Brien.
Ken O'Brien. Yeah, Ken O'Brien.
Yeah. You know, Dan Marino was the last quarterback taken in that first round, but when you talk about star power in a year, in an era of quarterbacks, I really don't see it existing right now. Charlton, and let me give you a stat on Carson Wentz.
Yeah.
Yes, he won a Division III championship. Did he play against any defensive linemen that are going to be drafted in the NFL?
No.
Okay, there's never been a quarterback 6'6" or above make it to the Super Bowl as a starter. So there's two knocks against him right there. He was also hurt last year as a senior in college where he missed about 5 games playing Division III football. So standing up under the pressure in the NFL of those hulking defensive linemen and vicious linebackers that are in that league, and even some safety blitzes that you don't recognize. You got to understand the scheme that he played in college. He played a lot in the shotgun, Charlton. People will say he played under center, but he played a lot in the shotgun. In the NFL, you got to be able to walk up under center, because if you can't walk up under center, then you're not going to be able to make that audible and recognize that blitz right away, Charlton. So he's going to have huge challenges. I know they're talking about he may end up in Philadelphia. We talked about Philadelphia having $30 million tied up in Sam Bradford and Chase Daniels. I can't see them drafting a quarterback unless they're going to trade a quarterback.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, you're right there, Big C. When people talk about the hype, and I know they got to sell it for TV because the networks have to get people paying attention because football season is year-round, basically, but they got to get someone to pay attention to what's going on. I think back to one of the great quarterbacks that was shafted coming out of college was the great Warren Moon, played at the University of Washington and actually led the Huskies to a Rose Bowl, but he was not given the chance to play in the NFL. But he's not getting the hype that these players are getting. And he was one of the top passers, yardage-wise, of any quarterback. He went to Canada and came and played in the NFL. But think about how players are hyped right now, and they don't even have the stats that Warren Moon had when he was in college up in Washington, Big C.
Well, you talk about Jeff Goff out of Cal, who in 3 years never won a Pac-12 championship. And that, to me, Charlton, lends to whether a guy is NFL ready, pro football ready. Could he win on his college level? Now, Carson Wentz won, but he didn't win playing against BCS schools, Charlton. That's a huge stride right there. Playing against BCS schools week in and week out. He had some victories against some of those, but they were the very lower tier.
I think Iowa State and Kansas State.
So, Iowa State, Kansas State. But when I look at Goff, who every week had to line up against BCS championship caliber teams and couldn't get the job done. We talked about David Shaw, the coach out of Stanford, saying that he really enjoyed watching Goff play. Well, anybody that you're beating up on every week, that you play,
I thought that was funny.
Don't mind watching him play. He can't beat you, so you don't have a problem sitting over there watching him from the sideline.
Yeah, that's funny.
Because you know that at the end of the game,
you're going to have a victory.
He may have some great stats, but he's going to lose the game on the scoreboard, Charles.
I thought that was funny because Shaw is the 8th highest paid coach in the Pac-12 when he's gone to the Rose Bowl for the Stanford Cardinals 2 of the last 3 years. He's had more players drafted out of the Pac-12 into the NFL than any other coach and team in the Pac-12. And he had the top yardage performer last year in the Pac-12 in McCaffrey, who came up number 2 in the Heisman Trophy voting. And then one more thing. He was also kind of brushed over when we were talking about coaches coming from college to the NFL. All this guy's done is win. His winning percentage at Stanford is better than when Coach Harbaugh was at Stanford, Big C, but he's been passed over too, just like his quarterback and running back, Big C.
Well, he's not status quo, Charlton. He's not part of the good old boy clique. He doesn't meet the criteria as far as appearance when they talk about coach. Now, Coach Shaw came into the NFL and had the same success in the NFL that he's had at the University of Stanford, and there's no indication that he wouldn't when you look at the success that Harbaugh had coming to the 49ers from Stanford, and you look at other coaches in the past. Now Stanford, Charlton, has been a breeding pool for successful head coaches in the NFL. Let me give you a couple examples that came out of Stanford. I think a few people might remember Bill Walsh.
Bill Walsh.
Who came out of Stanford. There was also Dennis Green, who came out of Stanford. At one point was 15-1 with Minnesota Vikings one year.
I remember that. Can't find a job today.
Sam Weiss also was on the Walsh's coaching staff.
At Stanford,
So when you think about that, and Harbaugh was the latest to come out of there, there's been a line of coaches that have come out of Stanford that has been successful versus any other university that you want to look at. So if you're looking for a college coach to become a successful NFL head coach, you have to look no further than the University of Stanford in Palo Alto, California, because it's been a breeding ground for NFL success, Charlton.
I agree.
Also, Steve Mariucci came out of there, Charlton.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, Mariucci came out of there as well. And speaking of success, this segment is also sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealer, the standard of the world. Go by and test drive the all-new Cadillac Escalade. And when you go down and test drive it, tell them that Charlton and Big C sent you. So also, Big C, when we talk about quarterbacks, and I remember covering the Pac-10 at the time, back in 1996, and they had some great players back then. I remember Jake Plummer at Arizona State, and he was hyped as a good player for the NFL. But one of the greater players that I saw was Mark Brunell, who played at the University of Washington and led the Huskies to a Rose Bowl. He was also very hyped coming out of college. But when I also go back to some of the old school players, I look at a guy like Troy Aikman, who also played in the Pac-10 at the time at UCLA under Coach Terry Donahue. He got the chance to play at UCLA because he played under Barry Switzer at Oklahoma, and he got his leg broken when Oklahoma played Miami. And there was a phone call made, Switzer out to UCLA, and Donahue was told, give this kid a chance. He has a great arm. So we all know about the great Troy Aikman, how he went on to have stardom at UCLA and then on into the NFL. Now he's in broadcast, Big C.
Well, you know, he also won 3 Super Bowls with the Dallas Cowboys, Charles. But, you know, I look at these talking heads and how they've hyped all these quarterbacks who are NFL ready. And, you know, these are franchise players.
Yeah.
And I look at over the last decade, Charlton, a little more than the last decade, of the quarterbacks that they've hyped so greatly and said that they were going to turn organizations around. You know, you look no further than Matt Leinart, you know, out of USC. What is he doing now? #1 draft pick.
Yeah.
Joey Heritage out of Oregon. What is he doing now? Former #1 draft pick.
Yeah.
Brady Quinn out of Notre Dame.
Yeah.
What is he doing now? Former #1 draft pick. Johnny Manziel, former #1 draft pick.
Yeah.
You go on and on up and down the list of these guys who've talked about these quarterbacks who will be great and turn over a franchise.
Yeah.
Now, those quarterbacks I just named, Charlton, all had losing records, okay?
Yeah.
But when we look at a quarterback like Vince Young, who was 33-19 in the NFL as a starter, and I kind of believe that was a winning record. I'm not sure how people evaluate
It depends on what kind of math you use, Big C.
You know, that you win 16% of your starts versus winning 23% of your starts. You know, because Blake Bortles, the quarterback in Jacksonville, I think he's only won like 32% of his starts or less.
Yeah.
As the #1 draft pick, and also Blaine Gabbert, who is a backup now in San Francisco.
Yeah, but Big C, that's the problem I have with you, because you always want to talk about the facts. Can't you just be an emotional person and start liking who they tell you should like? Haven't you heard in advertisement, you tell them what they should like, and long enough they'll start liking it, Big C. That's what I hear.
So what you're saying, I should believe my
believe what you hear. Exactly.
My blind eyes. Which one?
Exactly. Because when you talked about Vince Young, how he, in the Rose Bowl against Michigan and also against USC, he had over 400 yards total offense against both teams. Now, I don't see Goff doing anything like that. He was passing and running the ball, got a chance in the NFL, but they didn't stick with him. Even though he dominated in high school, he dominated in college, and the same players he was going to play against in the NFL, they kind of pulled back on him because the NFL still wants that white quarterback that looks like 1950s quarterbacks. And I know people don't want to say that too much, but this is one thing I also want to bring up, Big C. And this segment is sponsored by your Northern California BMW dealers, home of the ultimate driving machine. Go down and test drive the all-new 600 horsepower M7, also known as the 760 Li, and tell them that Charlton and Big C sent you. There's still talk on Colin Kaepernick, who's the last quarterback for the 49ers to ever go to the Super Bowl with the 49ers. They've only had 3, Joe Montana and also Steve Young. Kaepernick's the 3rd. They still have him on the roster. And even with that, and you talked about Vince Young having a winning record in the NFL, they're still trying to push Kaepernick out for some guy who's never won. Because for some reason, they're just bent on having what they see in their mind as successful, as opposed to looking at what they did on the field, Big C.
Charles, let's look at this. You know, when you talk about quarterbacks that have not had success in the NFL, that are making a copious amount of money, let's go to Chicago. Jay Cutler. Yeah. Started out in Denver. He's in Chicago. He hasn't had any success in the NFL. Ryan Tannehill in Miami, number one draft pick, hasn't had any success. Matthew Stafford, Detroit, hasn't had any success.
Yeah.
But I don't see anybody trying to run these quarterbacks out of town. A Matthew Stafford, a Ryan Tannehill, a Jay Cutler. They're talking about giving them more and more money.
Yeah.
And the list goes on. Matt Ryan in Atlanta has not done anything. One playoff game in 11 years that the Falcons have won. So he wasn't playing quarterback when that game was won.
Yeah.
And you look up and down the ledger, Charlton, around the league, you only hear about minority quarterbacks being in trouble.
Yeah.
You don't hear about other quarterbacks being in trouble. Last year when Seattle got off to a slow start, all the bashing was on Russell Wilson.
Yeah, they wanted to get rid of him.
The last 6 games of the season, Russell Wilson set an NFL record that went under the radar in touchdown passes and 300-yard games. No one had anything to say. Made it to the playoffs. Made it into the second round. But, no one said anything positive about Russell Wilson. You don't hear any scandals about him, anything.
No.
But if you have these losing quarterbacks, Charlton,
they get a pass,
and they're white, and you make $100 million, it's okay because the potential is there.
Yeah.
The potential is there for them to keep losing, keep getting a big paycheck, and the team never advancing in the playoffs, Charlton.
And that's the thing, too, we brought up with Brock Osweiler. We know that Manziel's in trouble for assault on a woman, and he should be. Everyone should be held accountable for that. But Brock Osweiler was also seen on camera pushing a woman twice down in the great state of Texas, but nothing happened. And they gave him $75 million contract, and he wasn't even a starter in the NFL, Big C. That's the amazing thing. And you have guys like Kaepernick that has actually gone to the Super Bowl, beaten Tom Brady on the road, beaten Cam Newton on the road, beaten Aaron Rodgers on the road. He beat everybody that he was asked to play against when he had a good team there, but they want to ship him out for some reason. So that's still part of the NFL Good Old Boy Network. But I want to ask you, when you talk about some of the great linemen, and I know you're a defensive guy, and when I think about some of the great linemen over the years, especially linebackers, I think of guys like Mike Singletary as linebacker, guys like Dick Butkus, Willie McGinnis, Von Miller's a new guy, but Lawrence Taylor, they're all in that mold that we've seen them have success, Big C. What are your thoughts on them? Because you always say it takes defense to win championships, and Denver proved that last year. So talk about Mike Singletary or Dick Butkus or Willie McGinnis or Lawrence Taylor, how they made an impact on the draft. That's more important than Wentz in golf, I think.
And, you talk about Mike Singletary, Charles, and he was only a second-round draft pick out of University of Baylor when he came out.
Yeah.
And he was a diminutive middle linebacker. He was only like 5'11".
Yeah.
But he had a heart that you could not weigh, Charlton. I mean, it was just enormous. And his knowledge and his intelligence of the game just resonated to all of those around him. And you think about the linebacking core that he played with the Bears, with Wilbur Marshall and Otis Wilson.
Yeah.
One of the top 2 linebacking cores of all time. Probably the only one that was better was the group that played in New Orleans with Ricky Jackson, Vaughn Johnson, the late Sam Mills.
Yeah.
And that group of linebackers, Patrick Swilling, Charlton, was just lights out every play. They can change the course of a football game. Now, I don't see those type of young players coming out in the draft. There's some decent linebackers coming out that will make rosters, that will make plays, but there's no Lawrence Taylor. The closest you're going to get to a Lawrence Taylor is what you already have in a Von Miller and a Khalil Mack in Oakland.
Yeah.
Those are the closest that you're going to get to a Lawrence Taylor.
Yeah.
The player today is not like the player, though, in the old days. When I think about a saying that Lawrence Taylor had one time, we got to play like a bunch of crazy dogs.
Yeah.
And that's how he played. His motor never slowed down. I mean, he was coming off that edge all night long, and people knew that he was in a presence. He played with Harry Carson. Banks was the other. Carl Banks was the other outside linebacker, and Harry Reese.
Yeah.
That was a linebacking core they had with the Giants.
Yeah.
But when you think about these players, they were unselfish. They know the greatness of their teammates, but they were also no stronger than the weakest link in the chain. So they played as a cohesive unit, Charlton. Now it's all about these me players.
Yeah.
And you're not going to find it in the draft. When you think about linemen coming out of the draft, and this is one of the most wealthy defensive lineman drafts you're ever going to have in history, Charlton.
Yeah.
With players coming out of the draft. But I don't see Reggie White showing up, the late, great Reggie White.
Right.
I don't see Michael Strahan coming off the edge, Charlton. There's Deacon Jones, the late Deacon Jones. I don't see him showing up.
Yeah.
When we talk about players that can play every down, go out and get the job done. I'm not seeing it. I don't even see a Jack Youngblood, former Ram, when the Rams are coming back to Los Angeles now. Jack Youngblood was a great defensive end with the Rams.
Yeah.
I don't see a Randy White in this draft from the Dallas Cowboys. I don't see a Harvey Martin in this draft. And Harvey Martin was a fourth-round draft pick with the Dallas Cowboys. Tom Landry knew how to draft players when he was with the Cowboys. And they drafted for need and the best player available.
Yeah. Well, see, that's the thing about the Rams right now. They did everything to sell the farm to get up to the number 1 pick, Big C. But you just brought up a great point. You brought up that great Chicago Bears team of '85. They won with their defense, and they had Walter Payton running the ball in the backfield. They even put Refrigerated Perry in the backfield at times. But they had McMahon at quarterback. He was not an all-pro quarterback, but he was manageable. He was able to manage the team. They had a good enough offensive line to open up running lanes for Walter Payton, but their defense is what helped them win the championship.
But Charles, you mentioned what that team was. It was a team based on the running game.
Yeah.
You had McMahon, who was a game manager, who was a great college quarterback at BYU.
Yeah.
But he was not asked to do in the NFL what he done at BYU. We're going to build an offensive line, which we talked about what the Rams should do. We have Walter Payton, one of the greatest running backs in the history of the NFL.
Yeah.
We need you to be able to get the ball to him. We also have Matt Suhey in the backfield.
Yeah.
Fullback out of Penn State, who will do an adequate job of blocking and also will run the ball and catch those swing passes out of the backfield.
Yeah.
This is what we need you to do. We got Willie Gault, if you ever want to go deep.
Oh, he was amazing.
One of the world's fastest sprinters. Ran in the Olympic trial.
Yeah.
Out of the University of Tennessee. So these are the things we need for you to do, but we need you to hand the ball off. That's what the Rams need. You have a Todd Gurley.
Yeah.
Who is going to be a workhorse in the NFL to the rest of this decade, Charlton.
Yeah.
Why not get all out of him that you can? Get yourself another quality offensive tackle.
Yeah.
Build that offensive line up and run the ball, which you have to do in the NFL to win, Charlton.
And when you talk about winning, too, and you look at some of these great players, defensive players like Charles Haley, Mean Joe Green. I remember watching those great players.
Charles Haley out of James Madison.
Yeah.
He was a fourth-round draft pick with the 49ers, Charlton.
Yeah, and he became an all-pro player, actually Hall of Famer. Hall of Famer, but they had the coaching. So I don't understand why Fisher, I know he hasn't won more than 8 games with the Rams, but for him to just jettison what they need, which is a better offensive line, because they already have an all-pro running back, and to go after a quarterback that's never won outside of high school, never won anything, and they're going to put them in Los Angeles and say, this is our new guy, but it's going to take 3 years. The Rams can win now if they have a better offensive line, because Gurley is legit. He's going to be all-pro player, and their defense is legit.
One of the best young defensive lines in NFL, Charles. Their defensive line is so good, they were able to let Chris Long go, who was an all-pro lineman just a couple years ago.
Yeah. So that's crazy to me, but, you know, I'm not the one making the calls. They're doing that. And also, speaking of making the calls, this final segment is also sponsored by your Northern California Ford dealer. They build it Ford tough. Go down and test drive the all-new Ford F-150. And when you go down and drive it, tell them that Charlton and Big C sent you. Now, Big C, I know we've covered a lot of the draft, and just 2 more players I want to talk about, because when I think about draft players and how they build up in the draft, I think about a guy by the name of Jerry Rice, the best receiver in the history of the NFL. Also, not far behind was Michael Irvin. They both went to different colleges, even though they were down in the South. Mississippi Valley State for Jerry Rice and University of Miami for Michael Irvin. But these 2 guys, they remind me of players that showed what it's like to be great because they had the work ethic, but they also had good teams to play with. And I just want you to touch on the team and the coaching decisions. We talk about Fisher compared to someone that can build a team like the Chuck Noll back in the day, or a Bill Walsh back in the day, and just your thoughts on why we have this recycled coaching staffs that don't win, but they get the chance to renew their contract all the time. Dennis Green is out of a job. You talked about so many things, and I don't understand it other than it just being good old boy network mixing.
Well, Charlton, I look no further than Marvin Lewis in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
He got a 1-year contract extension. Now, Marvin Lewis has been in the playoffs all but except for 1 year.
Yeah.
He's been the head coach in Cincinnati.
Amazing.
And, you know, there's no other coach other than Mike Tomlin in that division who has made the playoffs.
Yeah.
When you look at the division that they're in, two minority coaches in that division are the winningest coaches, Charlton, and they have to play against each other every year.
Yeah.
But when you talk about a Jeff Fisher who's only won 8 games in his best season with the Rams.
Yeah.
Now, if Marvin Lewis had won 8 games last year, he'd have lost his job.
Yeah.
I think about Lovie Smith, who came to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last season. He won more games, Charlton, in that 1 year than Greg Schiano had won in the 2 previous years.
Yeah.
Lost his job. So what's the standard of an African-American coach in the NFL? You go back to Art Shell when he coached with the
Raiders. Yeah.
Art Shell made the playoffs, lost his job. You know, so how is the standard different for an African-American quarterback? Dennis Green at one point was 15-1 with the Minnesota Vikings when they lost to the Atlanta Falcons when they went to the Super Bowl.
Yeah. And that's just
but
crazy.
It wasn't good enough to sustain his job over time, Charlton.
Yeah.
So when you look at these things and you look up and down the ledger, even the coach that's with the Lions right now, Caldwell, when he took over for Dungy at Indianapolis. Now, he made it to the playoffs, but the following year when he lost Peyton Manning, they said, okay, you got to go. And the whole team was built around Peyton Manning.
Yeah.
So they didn't have a quarterback in reserve. I think he went through a half a dozen quarterbacks trying to find somebody to fit the scheme of the offense. They could not operate the offense, but they blamed him.
Yeah.
But the organization has put all their money and eggs into Peyton Manning.
Yeah.
But the minority coaches in the NFL, Tom Flores, 2 Super Bowl wins, couldn't get a job after he left the Raiders. Minority coach.
Yeah.
Find me a white coach in the NFL with 2 Super Bowl wins who can't get a job. The league will fold, okay?
That's actually funny. And also a little bit around the NBA tonight. Miami's, they're taking on Charlotte. They're favored by 5.5. Portland's favored by 1 over the injured LA Clippers. And Golden State favored by 9.5 over the Houston Rockets. That game's in Oakland tonight. And they're playing that game without Steph Curry. But they're a great team, and they'll probably find a way to end that series tonight. Also, Big C, another broadcast brethren, Skip Bayless. He's the latest to leave ESPN, and he's going to be leaving after August when his contract is up. He also started ESPN back in 2004, and they had him teamed along with Stephen A. Smith. And they oftentimes had kind of inflammatory opinions about athletes and what's going on in the world of sports. What do you think of Skip Bayless, and why so many people are leaving ESPN? He's also headed to NBC with Mike Tirico, Big C.
Well, you know, when you look at it, it's been the worldwide leader in sports, but, you know, you get to a point that you can't grow any further within an organization.
Yeah.
People will call it cost-cutting measures and things of that nature. But I also have to look at, you know, when NBC is picking up all this high talent.
Yeah.
You know, the Olympics is about 100 days away now, Charlton, down in Rio de Janeiro.
Yeah.
You know, you look at the crew that NBC has now. You got Bob Costas, Al Michaels on board. You got Chris Collinsworth. You just bring in Mike Tirico. Skip Bayless, as you say now, is on the market and available. You got Dan Patrick down there. So they're putting together an all-star cast for this all-star event, Charlton, when you think about it. The amount of money that a network has to invest in an event like the Olympics, which is 2.5, 3 weeks long, that's a small investment to bring these multi-talented, multi-million-dollar broadcasters in to make your show the best show, Charlton.
Yeah.
And so money talks. It will make people move. It will make you change your address. And so that's what they've done. They're going to change that zip code. They're going to go to NBC. They're going to become a powerhouse again in the broadcast world.
Yeah.
And it's just better for everyone, Charlton.
Yeah, I think it is better all around. But just like with the Charlton and Big C Sports, you have a chance to go out and do your own thing, make your mark in the world. One thing that happens when you're at the network level, and we've both been there, it's an ephemeral position. You're hired and fired almost within the same handshake. But that's part of this business. And a lot of athletes, when athletes leave one team to another, we talked about Josh Brown leaving Carolina, signing with Washington, and then he was willing to take less money because they were forcing him, you're a great player, but we're not going to put all that money in you. We trust our defense and our linebackers more than our defensive backs. But just like in the broadcast booth, Big C, and you can speak about it in the final 2 minutes of the program, opportunity knocks, you got to open that door and run through it. So whether it's Mike Tirico or Skip Bayless, we know Lynn Swann, the new athletic director at USC, he also worked with ABC Monday Night Football at a time. So it's about taking the opportunity when that door is open, Big C. From a broadcaster's point of view, what goes on that makes that more possible than athletes to change positions, Big C?
Well, what happens is that you're known, your face is recognized. And Lynn Swann started off doing college football sideline with the great Keith Jackson, working on his crew along with Bob Greasy. So, you know, he had an opportunity to get his face known. As a Steeler, no one really knew what he looked like.
Yeah.
But they knew what he looked like when he was college football broadcast. Charlton, you know, it's like we have the draft coming up, and when you talk about opportunities, it's going to be a great weekend for a couple hundred young men. About 246 of them are going to get drafted, 250 of them are going to get drafted. But there's some misfortune that goes down the line. Because there's going to be some guys that lose their job because these guys get drafted. You just can't keep everybody. We talked about Bradford or Daniels. What is it? Philadelphia, if they draft a quarterback, has to make a trade with a quarterback.
Right.
But, you know, opportunity is being prepared. You know, and everyone prepares for this, whether it's in broadcasting or whether it's being an athlete on the field or on the court. You have to be at the peak of your mental and physical awareness. Those are the keys. And so every young man this weekend, every older man that's moving a job in the next couple of weeks are going to have to look at life from a different perspective now, Dalton.
And you're so right, Big C. So I love the draft coming up. We talked about John Matuzak. We talked about some of the greatest players in the game, from Joe Montana, Tom Brady, Warren Moon. Talked about the great Colin Kaepernick, Lawrence Taylor, Mike Singletary, all these great players, Jerry Rice, Charles Haley. I know they're trying to tell us the college kids are going to be as great as these Hall of Famers, but time will tell. I wish them all success. And also, as far as success, Big C, we are out of time again. And I hate when the show ends so fast.
You gotta start cutting this show.
I got to start. I got to get a new Rolex watch, get rid of this Timex that I have. But every Monday through Friday at 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time, worldwide, you can listen to Charlton and Big C Sports. We'll bring you Real Talk Sports. We hope that you enjoyed it. We thank you for listening. We appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.